Coming to you from 4,200 feet in the hills of Oregon, it is the voice of Chi-Town, the reddest beard in the high desert, your host of the MOA Broadcast, Sam Wilson. All right, folks, we got a fantastic show lined up for you today. As usual, we do not believe in putting out a substandard or a subpar product. So all you survivors out there that are tuning in, whether it's early morning on your way to work or you're already at work or you're just at home, taking it easy, we're ready to give you a great show. Let's get down to it. Show highlights. This is, episode 39 of the Make It Out Alive broadcast. We have White People Taco Night. We'll get to that first. It cracks me up. If you are on social media, you've probably heard of this, or you're familiar with it. If not, you'll get a laugh out of it. Out of control, pit bulls, machete attacks, and headless soccer. Has fist bumping completely replaced handshakes? Now, that's a good question. I'm looking forward to that. We won't spend too much time on that, but we'll dig into it a bit. And finally, a crossbow attack on a man's roommate in, you guessed it, Florida. Okay, folks, let's get down into it. I usually start the show off. When I was doing show prep the other day, I usually kind of break into what I was having for dinner. I mean, one of my favorite dinners I've talked about a number of times is a rare or even medium rare New York strip steak with the Michelin star scrambled eggs on the side, or basmati rice, one or the other. And so over the weekend, took a few minutes and decided to do something different and made tacos. And so it always reminds me of this. There's this song. Where did it go? Where's the time on this thing? Okay, we're good. There is this. If you haven't heard this song, White People Taco Night. It's one of the funniest things. Now, it has nothing to do with making fun of any racial stuff other than kind of making fun of just the stereotypical way that most, especially Midwestern Americans, which is what I am. I'm from Missouri. And we're Midwestern Americans that don't really have any kind of Hispanic influence or culture in their life, how they make white people tacos. So instead of, street taco style or all the other different types of, Hispanic versions of tacos and variations thereof, this guy, I'm not going to sing it. I sound ridiculous when I sing. You don't want to hear that, trust me. But this guy's talking about, you go to it's White People Taco Night. You get the taco shells from the grocery store. You get the ground beef from the grocery store. And he just goes through all the ingredients. And it's so funny because that's basically the way everybody that I knew growing up and even into adulthood made regular white people tacos. So what is the guy's name? We want to give him a shout out because it cracked me up. They eventually, I guess the song, I heard it on TikTok and other social media. And so people would take the song, and then they were just white people making tacos. They would video going through their kitchen, and it was almost exactly like the guy sang in the song. The regular taco shells and Ortega salsa and all this kind of stuff. It's hilarious. Good lighthearted fun, which is what we need now probably more than ever. So where is the name though? Lewberger. Lewberger, one word. So I don't know if it's Lewberger or Lewberger. That is the handle on YouTube. So go to YouTube and listen to the song. It's going to crack you up because I guess eventually it got popular enough on TikTok and social media. I guess it started off as the song first, and then they had to do a full version because so many people were using it for their, White People Taco Night that they wanted to go ahead and do a full song and a video for. They were happy about it, is my understanding. I did a little bit of research, not much, but they were happy about this little phenomenon. It's been around for several years. And anyway, the song just always cracks me up. So I was making tacos, and it wasn't quite exactly that. It was a little, a few different variations, but that's just for personal taste. But, the funny thing is that reminded me of the process. I don't know. That was kind of a family tradition growing up. One of the favorite family meals was taco night. And then, of course, the other, probably for most people, the big, if you're like Midwestern or regular, North American, pizza night was the other. And my dad wasn't a big fan of Pizza Hut, so we would go. In St. Louis. Now, this is if you are ever in St. Louis or the Midwest in that area, there is a chain, but they're what's called St. Louis style pizza. Now, if you're a hardcore pizza enthusiast and you love like the big flop of like certain New York style pizzas or even the deep dish Chicago, you may not be into St. Louis style pizza, but it is absolutely delicious in its own right. It's a round pizza, obviously, but they cut it in the squares, and it's more like almost like a wafer, not a cracker. It's not hard. It's soft, but it's very, very thin, and it's very, very thin, and it's, they use like sausage and there's whatever toppings. It's like anywhere else. But, and one of the other things they do specifically at this place called Emo's was the big chain. They were the one that was the most popular, but you could find other places like in St. Louis, down by the arch, there was Telena's. I enjoyed that pizza very much. Again, if you're not that type of pizza enthusiast, you may not get a kick out of it, but I loved it. And I try and get it anytime I can. But they use Provel cheese in there too, which gave it a little bit of a zip. It's kind of like a variation of provolone, I guess. It's been a long time since I looked up the actual ingredients, whatever, but it's a white cheese that had a little bit of a zip to it. Very good. So different pizza experience, but if you ever get a chance, try it. You may or may not like it. It's not dramatically different than regular pizza. It's just not like other pizzas. It's the same kind of gulf as between like Chicago style and New York style pizza. And there are a number of places that do it locally. And Emo's, again, IMO''S, Emo's was the big chain. They also had cannelloni and fried ravioli. Oh, if you've never had fried ravioli, it is so delicious. Imagine just regular raviolis that are deep fried and kind of crispy with a soft meat center, and you dip it into a red sauce. Oh, man. Covered in shredded cheese. It is delicious. Good times, good memories. Okay, now, I got to get into this episode, but we had a couple of emails from trying to do 2 episodes a week, maybe 3 occasionally, but the 2, like usually on Tuesday and Friday, I had to push it a day because I had a ton going on this week. But the Friday's episode of last week, we talked about the bourbon blades and whatever it was, the other thing, why men can't take the heat anymore. And we talked about the lack of accountability and why people have just, particularly men, I'm being hard on because men have turned into, for the most part, a bunch of pansies. And I'm not talking about, big, chest thumping, Rambo stuff, taking steroids and weightlifting and getting out of control over aggression and an over manifestation of hyper manliness. I'm just talking about men being, I got to be careful here. We're on the radio first before we go to the online version here, but men being wimps. And but at the same time, their egos are still so soft that if you say something they don't like, they don't go, oh, okay, well, whatever, and just move on like we used to. A lot of men, if they hear something they don't like now, they come unglued. And it's not just me saying this. If you look at like social media, people walk around, and if anything, camera phones have given us this phenomena now where we have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of hours of footage of all kinds of things we never ever would have had footage of before because people are walking around with their cameras and their camera phones and they're just filming things and videoing things. And so sometimes they catch chance encounters that never ever would have shown up on tape before. And I know it's not on tape, whatever, I don't care. That's how we always said it. But, and so we see people in all kinds of situations we've never before seen them. And we're seeing grown men, women do it too, but I'm going to give, whatever, we're focusing on men right now. And they should be better than this. And people say or do something. I'm not talking about like an overt attack or violence. People say something they don't mildly like or that mildly disturbs them, and they come unglued. They threaten violence. They actually do violence, and it is out of control. So without going back into that episode, I think there's definitely a link between low testosterone and raising and not being in a good family home. You can't, or 2-parent, home and family and so forth. You can't always control it. I'm not knocking anybody from any background, but the point was more, what can we do about it? And that was, the point. They were like, well, so what was the solution, Wilson? You got up in front of your camera. Guys, I don't have the solution. I don't think it's as easy as just some dude jumping in front of his camera in his knife shop while he's, drinking a Tom Collins and telling the world how to fix their problems. That isn't even the point of the show, The point of the show wasn't to answer everybody's questions about everything or to be the final word on things. If I could really summarize the point of the show, it's not even just about survival and preparedness, gear, knives, survival situations and everything else, and situational awareness. The whole point, in my opinion, if I was to bring it, down to a fine point, al grano, as I've heard some Spanish-speaking people say, it would be to stimulate thinking. That is really the point. And that kind of flows into all the other things, being prepared, being situationally aware. All of it is about stimulating thinking. What would I do in that situation? How would I do this better that I saw somebody else do poorly? And that is the point of this show, is to stimulate thinking. So, if you like that, we're going to maintain that, that line in the sand. We're not going to get into politics. We're going to discuss things that are inevitably political, because that is what a lot of the news cycle is about. And almost everything is linked in some way to a political side. But we're not going to take sides politically, and we're not going to sit here and bash one side or the other or anything in between. We're going to report the news, and of course, I'm going to have my opinions, and I give them just like I have been. But really, the point is to stimulate thinking so that you are ready when something happens or when things go wrong. And, let's leave it there and let's keep moving. Okay, good example. I put one in here I forgot about in my show notes. Bacon and me. Bacon is my dog. He's a beautiful white pointer with liver-colored spots. Beautiful dog. Everybody loves Bacon. He's a good boy. He is a very, very mild-mannered dog, as many pointers are. He's got energy, but he does not go looking for confrontation or even other animals. And I've talked on the show a number of times in the past about how he and I have both been attacked multiple times, by other dogs and wild dogs and such out here in the middle of nowhere in Oregon. And I've pepper sprayed a number of them and other things to deal with this threat. We have both bled from these attacks, and that's no joke. So he's a little bit, more concerned when dogs approach him now than he used to be after he's experienced that, but he is not an aggressive animal anyway. Anyway, people love Bacon. The other day, he and I I always take him with me when I go to this establishment, and I got an outdoor cafe, and we'll go there and get, burgers and fries and hot dogs and stuff. He loves hot dogs, obviously. And so, he goes with me on a leash. While we were there, we weren't there 20, maybe 30 seconds, and this very muscular pit bull came charging at him and barking really loud and aggressively. And fortunately, the dog must have had some good training, because even though it seemed aggressive at first, once it got up to the smelling zone where he and Bacon, or she and Bacon, I don't know, could sniff each other, he or she stopped and didn't get any more aggressive. Now, Bacon snapped a few times and barked without going forward. But again, that's because he's been attacked a number of times, and he's tired. He's tired of it, as am I. So my dog Bacon was on a leash. This dog comes charging out of nowhere, and I had Bacon on. I pulled him back in to keep him, so he couldn't get tore up and pulled back. And fortunately, the dog didn't attack. But I had my pepper spray in my hand. No one else saw it. The only reason I didn't hose that dog down, because they were well within that personal cone or sphere of personal and safety space, is because there were outdoor diners there, and they're eating their burgers and drinking their shakes and everything. I didn't want to turn it into a whole thing. And it's not the establishment's fault, but this lady didn't have her dog on a leash. And whenever this happened, I was sitting there thinking, what can I do besides pepper spray next? And fortunately, she came up, got her dog, and gave me the nastiest look whenever I said, could you please get your dog on a leash or put him up? And she looked at me like I was an absolute mass murderer or something. And I'm thinking, what is wrong with people's accountability? That was not a situation of my creation or my doing. And I'm not whining or complaining. I just like to think of these things over and get inside people's heads. Why do they do these things? If she had just said, oh, I'm sorry, or not even said I'm sorry, and put the dog up, I wouldn't have cared. I wouldn't have cared at all. But the fact that she looked at me like I was some sort of, I don't know, I got to keep this PG, but yeah, like I was a real dirty loser. It's unbelievable to me. So, that's the question, though. What would you do if that happened to you? Would you have a plan? If you couldn't use pepper spray, or if you didn't have pepper spray, would you be ready for that situation? I had step number 2 ready in my mind, but it was about to get very, very ugly. That's the last thing I want to do. I want to have to get a hamburger and a hot dog with my dog to have a good time, not get into some sort of bloody dog fight, So anyway, that is the point of this show, is not to necessarily give people all the answers, because if even if I had answers or suggestions, what may work very well for one person in one situation wouldn't work in another. So the point is to stimulate thinking, and that's kind of the point with that illustration there. These are situations that may be uncommon to you, but very possible to find yourselves in. So make sure you're prepared, stimulate that thinking, and be situationally aware and prepare for that event. All right, where are we on time here? Okay, we're doing pretty good. Let's go ahead and jump in. We do our first story. This is insane. This one was horrible. Let's jump in. Here's the headline. This one comes to us via the New York Post. Illegal immigrant allegedly beheaded a Dallas motel manager with machete. kicked his head like a quote-unquote soccer ball. Horrible story. And we're going to jump into something here later on after we finish the story. You'll notice some parts of the story refer to the Biden administration this and the Trump administration that, kicking sand and throwing blame. And I'm not saying that that's not true, but that's the kind of thing that I'm trying to avoid. I'll get into that a minute later, but it even gets difficult sometimes to find good news stories because the media has become so biased. That's not a political statement. Guys, that's a fact. Anyway, let's go. And here's the story. This is not me. An illegal immigrant with a lengthy criminal history who was released under the Biden administration was arrested on Wednesday after allegedly beheading a hotel manager in front of his family and kicking his head like a soccer ball, according to authorities and reports. Jordanes Cobos Martinez, 37 years of age, started an argument with his manager, Chandra, and I'm going to mess this name up. I believe it's an Indian name. My apologies. Nagmalia, at a downtown suites motel in Dallas on Wednesday morning while cleaning a room with another employee, according to the arrest warrant. The manager, 50 years of age, told the pair not to use a washing machine that was broken, but Cobos Martinez, a Cuban national, grew irate over the manager and listing blah, blah, blah. Basically, he was mad that the Indian, the manager, I don't know why he would be upset at this, but he was upset that the manager got a Spanish-speaking employee to translate between the two of them instead of just speaking to him in Spanish. So apparently the manager did speak Spanish, or Cobos Martinez allegedly did believe that he spoke Spanish. That was the catalyst, though. The manager pulled in another Spanish-speaking employee to translate this mess as he was telling him to do or not do something. Surveillance footage then caught Cobos Martinez leaving the room, pulling out a machete and slashing Nagmalia. The manager bolted to the office where his son and wife were while he was still under attack. He then, the wife and son tried to intervene, but Cobos Martinez, quote, continued to slaughter him until his head was removed from his body, police said, using the machete. Jeez, imagine your kid and your wife are watching this, and of course it's happening to you. Cobos Martinez allegedly then gruesomely kicked Nagmalia's head, that's the manager, his head twice into the parking lot like a soccer ball, and then picked it up and threw it in the dumpster, cops said. Witnesses called 911 and they found him covered in the blood and holding the machete a few blocks away, allegedly, according to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. He allegedly admitted to police during a video interview that he killed his manager. What an insane thing to have happen. And he's in ICE custody, yada yada. This was the point. Okay, he had been in ICE custody. He was released on January 13 of this year, apparently, under Biden administration. An ICE spokesperson told the Post this barbaric criminal was released because Cuba would not accept him because of his criminal history. So anyway, they go on. They kick some more mud and everything else, or kick some sand and so forth. Allegedly, the maniac motel worker also has a laundry list of prior criminal charges: assault, aggravated assault, misdemeanor assault charge, and did jail time, and so on and so forth. Also allegedly tried to carjack a 22-year-old woman, false imprisonment, failure to appear, carjack. I mean, this guy's got a whole. It's impossible to imagine. And this is, again, not trying to take a side here. Impossible to imagine how this guy is not in custody. And that brings me. So this is the thing I wanted. This was the real heart of that story, no pun intended, that I wanted to get to was Tom Homan. If you are aware of this, Tom Homan is the border czar for Trump. He's been spearheading the ICE and the immigration and the deportation process here in the U.S., okay, with ICE and DHS and securing the border. There was a story, and I'm not going to go into the whole story because the whole thing is very, very shaky on both sides, and I haven't seen any proof, and no one's been producing any proof that I'm aware of, just accusations and so forth and insider sources. This story comes to us from Fox News. White House denies Homan took cash and FBI sting and slams probe as political. So, long story short, MSNBC reported Saturday that Homan allegedly took $50,000 in cash in September 2024 from undercover FBI agents who he believed were business executives, after suggesting he could help them secure government contracts with a second Trump administration. So basically what you got is one side here is saying that this guy Homan, who has been a hero on the right, and has been really, I mean, he's been deporting, and has been very successful and effective in that particular role. I think he used to be the ICE director or whatever it's called. Basically, they're alleging that he took $50,000. They even said there was video of it, of him taking $50,000 while guaranteeing that he could get, or allegedly guaranteeing that he could get government contracts for people that paid him off, allegedly. And they said there's video of him taking 50 grand in cash. The White House said there wasn't, and there's no good evidence of this. And they closed the investigation because it wasn't a suitable enough or a strong enough case, plausible enough case. So they shut it down. Where's the truth? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see if there's ever any actual evidence or proof brought out of this. But the point was this whole thing, this is the problem with the partisanship that we see in the news media. And again, if you're over 25 or 30 at least, you're surely aware of this. There are certain news stations, we're always going to slant one side, one way or direction, and another station is going to do it this way. It makes it almost impossible to get the news directly from one source. That was the point I was kind of alluding to earlier. Whenever I do this show in my show prep, I have to go sometimes 2 or 3 different sources to get a news story. And here is the thing. Those news stories will vary dramatically from one source to another. Like if I go from maybe MSNBC to Fox News or New York Post to CNN or one of the others, and you're like, how can we have all of this editorializing and these opinions? I just want the facts. So anyway, it's a very difficult thing to do, and that's a problem. That's one of the reasons why what they call the legacy media now is fading so fast. They're losing and shedding numbers and viewers dramatically because people are tired of this. The big thing to me, I already suspected and knew that because I've seen how the media operates. Anybody with a brain has seen it. But whenever I got X, with Twitter, you just saw so many things that you never, ever, ever heard in the news media. Things you suspected were happening or were true, but you couldn't really confirm because without proof, you can't say it's actually happening. And I'm not trying to push anybody in one direction or another. The point is just, get the facts. And that's the way the news used to be. They used to be a credible source of journalism. They would provide you with the information, and then you or me as an adult would draw our own conclusions and make our own decisions. So anyway, the tie-in there was that is what we do here at the MOA Broadcast. When we cover news stories, we give you the info, you do what you want with it, and we keep the politics out of it. And then we saw this with the explosion. Again, I'm not going to get deep into it because it's already been a mess. Unfortunately, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We've seen dozens, if not hundreds of people losing their lives because they were online saying ugly things about a man who just lost his life. Again, you believe and think whatever you want about that. I'm not pushing you one way or the other, and I'm not going to get into my thoughts and feelings on it. It doesn't matter. But that is the problem we have, is we've got this divide here that is, it's nasty. Some of the things these people were saying, I can't imagine saying that about even a horrible person. And, I mean, just human decency should come into play there at some point. Anyway, a lot of them have lost their lives, or not their lives, their jobs and positions and so forth over their remarks. Jimmy Kimmel just came back on air Tuesday night after he made some comments. We'll leave it alone at that. So yeah, that's the problem with the news media and that divide. It's being fueled and pushing people in opposite polar directions, and it's only going to make things worse. So anyway, do I have the answers and solutions? No, but we try and get ourselves a good laugh here occasionally, and that brings us to the fist bump. So what is the fist bumping thing? This is not going to be a negative story by any means. This kind of fist bumping has been around for a long time. It's like when you walk up, people over a certain age used to walk up, and when you met someone new, male or female, you would shake hands, okay? Now, this kind of got pushed even further in COVID. They did that ridiculous elbow bump, which I thought was the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. I felt so, let me be careful how I put this here, so dumb walking up and if you got the video version, if you haven't seen, you're sitting here walking up and bumping elbows with people. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life. And the idea being you're supposed to have less germ exposure and so forth. Okay, whatever. So then the fist bump thing kind of came into play. The fist bumping, it's definitely with the younger crowd, it's more popular, and it's less of a skin on skin commitment. And so if let's say you're walking up to someone who's a little bit leery of you or what you're doing or whatever, the fist bump is a little less invasive way to establish that rapport than the handshake. But to me, the handshake, especially again, if you're particularly a male over a certain age, and I'll just put it that way, not to be coy or facetious. But if you're over a certain age, a good handshake was part of the training you got from your father, or whoever the male figurehead was in your life growing up. This wasn't just a way of greeting someone, it was a way of judging someone or taking the measure of a man, particularly a woman. To a lesser extent, it was a different kind of standard, if you want to put it that way, and you can run with that however you want. But particularly when men shook hands, this was how you were kind of feeling the other guy out and seeing, what's this guy made of. And while it wasn't, 100% bulletproof and always true and accurate, you kind of got to feel if a guy had a limp-wristed, like soft, dead fish, cold handshake, immediately, okay, I don't know if I can trust this guy in a clutch situation. When the chips are down, this guy's going to probably be like his handshake, weak. And you knew that kind of gave you an insight into this person. And if someone had a firm but not aggressive handshake, but a firm, just a good, 1 or 2 pumps, then you release and you walk away, that kind of told you something about that guy. If a guy was sitting there and trying to crush your hand and squeeze it to death, while you're shaking his hand, you knew this guy is probably weak, he's probably insecure, and he's probably trying to, to project all kinds of strength that he doesn't really have inside to overcompensate for whatever his weakness is. And so, those were things that kind of gave you the measure of a man. A fist bump doesn't do that. And while I get it, it's less invasive, and particularly the younger crowd, they took to it very, very quickly. It makes you wonder, is handshaking going to be phased out completely? I can't imagine walking up to an actual, like a real business meeting or a serious situation and like fist bumping someone, but that's kind of what's happening. So it's one of those things. No major point there, societal alarm, just something that I was thinking of while this happened to me the other day. I saw some guys fist bumping each other, and when I stuck my hand out to shake hands, they looked at me like I was some kind of a leper. And so whatever. That was my thoughts on that. So let's move on to the next one. Where are we at? Do we got time for this? Let's do it briefly. I had a couple of questions, and again, we refer to the knives and the survival and stuff here frequently. We have a little bit less focus on preparedness on this episode. We'll do some more next episode. We had some other things to speak about. But coatings on steel. For those of you curious, people wonder, like, why do certain knives get coatings? Why do they paint them and why others don't? Guys, you got to remember, coatings serve a very valuable purpose for a variety of reasons. Okay, if the 2 primary types of steel you're going to have, the basic ones are carbon and stainless. Stainless steel is basically like its name says. It's not rust-proof or stain-proof, but it will stain less. That's not technically how that translates, but we're having a little fun here. Stainless steel is very, very corrosion resistant compared to carbon steel. Carbon steel is like, we've talked about this, like the old hickory knives and the knives your grandparents probably had that, if you sat there and cut into an onion or a tomato, that would stain readily and they would rust if left out, left wet in the sink. So coatings, if you're using carbon steel, are very important. What we use here in the Wilson Knife Shop and Techline Knives and Gear Convoy, we use gun coat. It's not the gun coat you get from like Brownells, which is like a spray paint. I'm not sure what all is going on there, but this is KG Industries gun coat, and it is a baked on coating. You have to chemically clean the steel and then blast it, and then you will spray it on in a very fine mist at like 5 to 10 thousandths thick, and then it gets baked at a certain temperature for an hour or 2 or 3, whatever you want to do. And it's very durable. The main reason that I use it is not the durability. It doesn't do quite as well as like powder coat in like friction settings, like batoning and chopping and stuff, but it's a fraction of the thickness, so you get a lot less drag. The primary reason I use the gun coat is, number 1, it is extremely corrosion resistant. Number 2, it doesn't add drag to the knife by adding a rubbery, thick coating on the outside. And 2, it's chemically resistant extremely well. I don't think there's any known solvents that will readily affect it. So you can clean your knives and gear, in acetone, and it won't have a negative effect. And this is particularly important. I do a lot of, like, on my custom side, I make what look like the Rambo knives, like from First Blood and so forth. They have a 2-tone finish with a blasted center and shiny edges on the blade. So if you leave a blasted finish on there, if you do a lot of chopping, tree sap, or if you clean game or fish, like blood and other innards and so forth, that material, organic matter, will kind of get stuck into that blasted finish, and it's very difficult to get out without blasting. So the gun coat is a very thin, it's not like bulked on paint. It prevents that from getting stained, and it's also easy to clean. You can use brake cleaner or whatever you want, and it's not going to harm it. and I'm not picking on anyone or trying to make a point here, but some guys will use like spray paint and like Krylon and rattle can and so forth on their knives or guns. That's fine until it comes time to clean it. And then if you use acetone or ethanol or whatever, in a lot of cases, it will loosen it right up and pull it off or smear it or whatever else. So that's why. The point wasn't that they're not as good. The point is that's why I chose the gun coat in the first place, was its extreme chemical resistance and heat resistance as well. So there you go. That's that. Was the, we got... Okay, we got a brief one. I was going to share this story. So I got a new cat I've told you about a number of times, Cobra. Him and Bacon are getting along just fine now, and Cobra is enjoying the inside life. I got him off the street at a young age. The last cat I had her for around 16 years, give or take. The last several years of her life, she was in very good health and had a lot of spunk. She had a lot of attitude, okay? But she was a diabetic for the last several years of her life. So I had to give her an insulin shot, twice a day most of the time. And, she had just a lot of spunk. She would walk up and like just swat Bacon across the face just for no reason. Or she would sometimes stand outside of his doggy door on the inside of the house. And he's trying to get inside the doggy door. And she would stand there and just like swat his nose to prevent him from getting into his doggy door, to the point where he's now traumatized. It takes him 4 or 5 times of like bumping his head through to get through the doggy door. So one day, I was sitting there in the living room, and I had the blinds open and the door and the window open. It was a nice day out, and she was whenever she saw the needle and heard the needle and the insulin bottle come out, she would come running because she knew that meant she got fed when she got her insulin shot. So she came running, and for some reason, she was giving me crap that day. She walked up and just like bit me on the leg real hard for no reason at all, even though she was about to get her insulin shot and her food and make her happy. So I was sitting here and I was like, okay, you know what? Fine. You want some drugs? And she started swatting at me to get the insulin shot. You want some drugs? I'm going to give you the hard stuff. Come on. Here you go. You want some good stuff? I'm going to give it to you right now, in a playful manner, something along those lines. Well, the funny thing is I looked up and the UPS guy was out there. The porch was right outside that window. He was like 5 feet straight away from me as the crow flies, 5 feet straight across from me. And the window was open. He heard everything I just said. He was staring at me like I was some kind of a psycho. Because I was asking my cat while I'm holding this syringe, and holding on to the nape of her neck where you would kind of pinch the fur up to give her that, or the skin up to give her the shot. And I'm like, you want the hard stuff? I'm going to give you the good stuff. And so anyway, it cracked me up. I thought I'd share the story. Let's get to our final spot today. We go to, you guessed it, Florida. Here's the headline. This one comes to us from Yahoo. Florida man arrested after allegedly shooting his parasite roommate with a crossbow. A Florida man is facing attempted murder charges after deputies say he tried to kill his roommate with a crossbow during an early morning argument in Key Largo. According to the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, via the local Fox affiliate, Fox 13, deputies responded to a disturbance call around 6 a.m. where 2 men, both in their 60s, had been living together for several years. When they arrived, they found 61-year-old George Henry Balboni lying in the front yard with a bloody face and several arrows scattered in him and around him. The victim, a 69-year-old man, told deputies the confrontation started after Balboni found a vodka bottle in the trash earlier in the week. I don't know if somebody fell off the wagon or what happened there, but Balboni allegedly became enraged, calling his roommate a parasite, and later lured him to a vehicle on the property. Investigators say once he lured him to the vehicle, he then fired an arrow, but missed. The victim sustained only a small cut to his ear during the crossbow attack. A fight then broke out, and the victim was able to wrestle the crossbow away from Balboni and beat him with it, and basically pistol whipped him with his own crossbow while knocking him to the ground. Balboni was left with visible head injuries and was transported to a local hospital for treatment. The victim declined medical attention. Balboni allegedly admitted to firing the crossbow and told investigators he had no remorse for attempting to kill his roommate. They confirmed the two men had a long history of disputes. Balboni has been charged with attempted murder and remains in custody. The victim is expected to recover fully from his injuries. So that's going to do it, folks. And all right, that's it. Stay safe out there, survivors. Be careful and remember, don't wait to prepare for an emergency until it's too late. If you wait, you may not make it out alive. Stay safe out there, folks.